I work as a maid at Mom's fancy party until my name was announced. My name is Angelina Martinez. I'm 37 years old, and I'm currently standing in a ballroom that I own, serving champagne from my own vineyard to people who think I'm the help. The irony is so delicious, I'm tempted to laugh out loud. But that would ruin the most elaborate social experiment I've ever conducted. You see, tonight is the Martinez family's annual holiday gala, an event my mother has been planning for months to showcase our family's success to Madrid's elite. What she doesn't know is that I've been funding this entire spectacle through a web of shell corporations so complex it would make international tax lawyers weep with joy. The venue, I bought it last year. The catering company, I own a controlling stake. Even the flowers were grown on property I acquired through my investment firm. But to my beloved family, I'm just Angelina, the disappointing daughter who threw away every opportunity and chose to live a bohemian lifestyle instead of following the respectable path they'd mapped out for me. If only they knew that my bohemian lifestyle included managing one of Europe's largest private investment firms and having breakfast with royalty on a semi-regular basis. Tonight, I'm going to find out exactly what they really think of me. And then, I'm going to show them who I really am. I've always been good at blending in, when you're naturally petite with olive skin and dark hair. Wearing a simple black dress and carrying a serving tray makes you functionally invisible to the kind of people who attend events like this. It's a skill I've cultivated over the years, not because I enjoy being overlooked, but because you learn so much more about people when they think you can't hear them. The Palacio de Cristal had been transformed into what my mother undoubtedly considered the height of sophistication, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over cream and gold decor. Chamber music played by musicians I'd personally selected, and enough champagne to float a small yacht. The guest list read like a who's who of Spanish society politicians, business leaders, old money families, and enough social climbers to staff a mountaineering expedition. I moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, refilling glasses and observing conversations while my phone buzzed intermittently with updates from my assistant about deals closing across 3 continents. The contrast was surreal. Smile politely at Senora Vega while approving a $50 million acquisition in Munich. Nod respectfully at Judge Martinez while reviewing contracts for a vineyard purchase in Tuscany. My mother, Isabella Martinez Delgado, stood near the grand staircase in a burgundy gown that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, holding court with her usual circle of admirers. At 58, she was still striking perfectly coiffed silver hair, jewelry that belonged in a museum, and the kind of imperious bearing that came from a lifetime of never being told no by anyone who mattered. My stepfather, Eduardo Delgado, lurked nearby in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, playing the role of distinguished businessman despite the fact that his family's construction company had been hemorrhaging money for 3 years. What Eduardo didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying up his debts through intermediary firms, essentially keeping his business afloat while he complained about the financial irresponsibility of the younger generation. But my favorite target for observation was my cousin Camila Martinez Santos, 28 years old and absolutely convinced that her recent promotion to junior vice president at Meridian Financial made her the family's crowning achievement. Camila stood near the bar, gesturing dramatically while explaining to anyone who'd listen how she'd revolutionized their European investment strategy. If only she knew that Meridian Financial's European division had been acquired by my firm 6 weeks ago, and her entire department was currently under review for optimization. The paperwork was sitting on my desk, awaiting my final signature on which positions would be retained in the restructuring. I approached their conversation circle with a fresh bottle of champagne, moving with the kind of deferential efficiency that wealthy people expected from service staff. Completely transformed their approach to emerging markets. Camilla was saying to a gentleman I recognized as Miguel Santos, a newspaper publisher whose company I'd been considering acquiring. The previous strategy was absolutely primitive. Thank goodness they finally brought in someone with real vision. How impressive, Miguel replied politely, though I could see him checking his watch. Oh, it really has been, my mother chimed in, accepting a fresh glass from my tray without even glancing at me. Camilla has such a brilliant mind for business, unlike some people in our family who prefer to dabble in less serious pursuits. I nearly choked on my own composure. Less serious pursuits. Last week, I'd had lunch with the Prime Minister of Luxembourg to discuss infrastructure investments that would create thousands of jobs. 2 days ago, I'd finalized a deal that would provide clean water access to rural communities across 3 African countries. But sure, Mother, let's call it dabbling. It's such a shame, Camilla continued, warming to what was apparently her favorite topic. When people waste their potential, look at my cousin Angelina, brilliant girl, wonderful education. But she chose to throw it all away for some artistic fantasy. I carefully refilled Miguel's glass, keeping my expression neutral while internally calculating how much pleasure I'd derive from Camilla's reaction when she learned her new boss was 28 years old and in possession of an MBA from Cambridge. Angelina? Miguel asked politely. My daughter, my mother said with the kind of long-suffering sigh usually reserved for discussing chronic illnesses. Beautiful girl, but completely impractical. We offered her every opportunity positions in Eduardo's company, introductions to all the right people, even arranged interviews with the most prestigious firms in Madrid. And she turned them all down, Eduardo added with obvious disapproval. Said she wanted to find her own way and build something meaningful. You can imagine how well that worked out. Actually, it had worked out quite well. Finding my own way had led to founding Martinez Capital Partners, which now managed $12 billion in assets across 17 countries. Building something meaningful had resulted in a foundation that provided educational scholarships to over 3,000 students annually. But who was I to interrupt their narrative? She's probably serving drinks at some cafe in Barcelona. Camilla said with a laugh that made me want to accidentally spill an entire bottle of champagne on her designer dress. Or teaching art classes to children. Very noble, I'm sure, but hardly the kind of success the family had hoped for. Miguel looked uncomfortable with the conversation's direction, but my family was just getting started. The worst part, my mother continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, is that she could have married Alejandro Herrera. Do you know the Herrera shipping family worth hundreds of millions? But no, Angelina said she wasn't ready for marriage, that she needed to focus on her career. I remembered Alejandro Herrera, charming, handsome, and about as intellectually stimulating as a houseplant. He'd proposed 3 months after we'd started dating, apparently under pressure from his family to marry someone with appropriate connections. I turned him down because I was 25 years old and more interested in learning how global markets worked than planning wedding menus. Also, because I'd already started making more money than he did, though I'd kept that information to myself. She's 37 now, Eduardo said, shaking his head sadly. Living alone, no children, no real career prospects. It's tragic, really. I felt my phone buzz and discreetly checked the message while pretending to arrange empty glasses on my tray. It was from James Pemberton, my chief legal counsel. Royal Netherlands Bank merger approved. 2.3B deal closing tomorrow. Congratulations, boss. I smiled slightly, thinking about how Eduardo would react if he knew his stepdaughter had just completed a merger worth more than his entire family's net worth across 4 generations. Perhaps she'll eventually settle down with someone appropriate, Camilla said generously. Though at her age, with no real accomplishments, it won't be easy. That's when I decided I'd heard enough. I excused myself to the service corridor, ostensibly to retrieve more champagne, but actually to take the call that had been buzzing insistently for the past 10 minutes. The caller ID showed Buckingham Palace Private Office, which meant my breakfast meeting tomorrow had probably been moved again. Martinez Capital Partners, Angelina speaking. I answered quietly. Ms. Martinez, it's Charles from the private secretary's office. His Royal Highness wanted to confirm your meeting tomorrow has been moved to 9 a.m. instead of 8:30. Will that work with your flight schedule? I glanced at my watch. If I left the gala by midnight, I could be at the airport by 12:30, wheels up at 1 a.m., and land at Heathrow with plenty of time to spare. That's perfect. Charles, please confirm the agenda includes the renewable energy portfolio and the Commonwealth Development Fund. Absolutely. His Royal Highness is particularly interested in your thoughts on the African infrastructure projects. After hanging up, I checked my other messages. 3 merger approvals awaiting final signature, 2 acquisition offers for companies I'd been watching, and a text from my assistant reminding me that Forbes wanted to schedule the interview for their 40 under 40 feature. Well, technically, I was 37 under 40, but who was counting? The most interesting message was from Alessandro Romano, my head of European operations. Meridian Financial Acquisition complete. Camila Martinez Santos scheduled for review Monday. Should I mention her family connection? I typed back quickly. No family preferences, merit-based evaluation only. If she's competent, she stays. If not, I added a shrugging emoji and put my phone away. When I returned to the ballroom, my family had moved to a seating area near the orchestra, apparently having cornered some poor businessman who'd made the mistake of asking polite questions about their various endeavors. I approached with fresh drinks, positioning myself within earshot while maintaining my invisible server persona. Of course, Camilla's success at Meridian Financial has opened so many doors for her, my mother was explaining to the trapped gentleman, who looked like he was calculating escape routes. She's being courted by headhunters from all the major firms. Actually, Camilla was being courted by exactly 0 headhunters, because her performance reviews indicated she was competent but unremarkable, with a tendency to oversell her contributions to team projects. I knew this because I'd read her file yesterday while reviewing the Meridian acquisition. And what about your other daughter? The gentleman asked politely. The one you mentioned earlier. My mother's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Angelina is finding herself. Still, at 37. She's probably pouring drinks somewhere, Camilla added with a laugh. Very authentic, very bohemian. I'm sure she's happy with her choices. The businessman glanced at me refilling glasses nearby, and for a moment I thought he might make the connection. But wealthy people rarely actually look at service staff, so the moment passed without recognition. It's such a waste, Eduardo said, warming to his favorite topic. We spent a fortune on her education, private schools, university abroad, language programs. She speaks 4 languages fluently, has a degree in international economics, and showed real promise in financial analysis. Actually, I spoke 6 languages fluently and had 2 degrees. But who was counting? But instead of using those advantages, he continued, she chose to disappear into some fantasy about making her own way in the world, as if family connections and proven business relationships weren't valuable assets. I almost laughed out loud. Eduardo's proven business relationships consisted mainly of other construction company owners who spent their time bidding on increasingly smaller contracts while complaining about government regulations. My business relationships included sovereign wealth funds, royal investment offices, and tech billionaires who called me personally when they needed advice on market strategy. The tragedy, my mother added, is that she had every opportunity to be part of something established and successful. Instead, she chose independence. She pronounced independence like it was a social disease. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Sarah Chen, my head of Asian operations. Shanghai deal closing ahead of schedule. 800 NEM on profit locked in. Team is celebrating. Wish you were here. I wished I was there too, instead of listening to my family discuss my failures while standing in a ballroom I owned, drinking wine from grapes I'd grown, surrounded by business leaders who'd taken my calls if they knew who I really was. That's when I decided the experiment had gone on long enough. I waited until the perfect moment when my family was holding court near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by a small crowd of society types who were hanging on their every word about business and success. The orchestra had just finished a piece, creating a natural lull in conversation that would carry my voice clearly across the immediate area. I approached their circle with my serving tray, but this time, instead of deferentially offering refills, I set the tray down on a nearby table and straightened to my full height. "Excuse me," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the ambient chatter. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about missed opportunities and family disappointment." My mother looked startled to be addressed directly by what she assumed was a member of the serving staff. "I'm sorry, but this is a private conversation." "Oh, I know exactly what kind of conversation it is." "Mother," I said, removing the small earpiece I'd been wearing to receive calls and letting my hair down from its simple service-appropriate style. "You've been having this conversation about me for the past 12 years. The recognition dawned slowly. First confusion, then shock, then something approaching horror, as my mother realized her failed daughter had been serving drinks while listening to them mock her life choices. "Angelina," Camilla's voice came out as a squeak. "What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like the help?" I smiled, enjoying the way her face was cycling through various shades of embarrassment. "Because it's fascinating what people say when they think you can't hear them." The small crowd around us had fallen silent, sensing drama, but not yet understanding the dynamics at play. Eduardo tried to take control of the situation. "Angelina, this is highly inappropriate. You can't just interrupt." "Actually, Eduardo, I can interrupt anything I want in this building, since I own it." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the chandelier crystals tinkling in the air conditioning. "What did you just say?" my mother asked faintly. I pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio management app, showing the screen to anyone close enough to see. Palacio de Cristal Properties, LLC, purchased 14 months ago through Martinez Capital Partners for $12.3 million. "Would you like to see the deed?" My mother sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "But that's impossible," Camilla stammered. You don't, how could you possibly, how could I possibly afford a $12 million property acquisition?" I asked sweetly. "The same way I afforded to purchase the vineyard that produced tonight's champagne. Acquire a controlling stake in the catering company that prepared your dinner, and fund the foundation that sponsored your charity auction last month." I gestured around the ballroom with casual authority. "Every glass of wine you've consumed tonight came from grapes I grew. Every canapé was prepared by a company I own. Even the musicians were selected and booked through my event management subsidiary." Eduardo's face had gone an alarming shade of purple. That's not possible. I'm what?" "Eduardo, a failure. A disappointment." I pulled up another app on my phone. "Let me show you something interesting. Delgado Construction's debt portfolio." I turned the screen toward him, watching his expression change as he recognized his own company's financial information. "Your firm has been carrying $3.2 million in debt for the past 18 months. The creditors holding those debts, shell companies owned by Martinez Capital Partners, which means I've been keeping your business afloat while you've been telling people I have no real career prospects." The crowd around us was growing larger as people sensed something significant happening. I recognized several faces from financial magazines, a few politicians, and at least 3 people I'd had business meetings with who clearly hadn't connected the simply dressed woman at those meetings with the Martinez family disappointment. "This is," my mother started, then stopped, apparently unable to find words. "Unbelievable," I suggested helpfully. "Let me give you some context." I scrolled through my phone to the Martinez Capital Partners overview page, holding it up so anyone nearby could see the asset management figures. Martinez Capital Partners currently manages $12.7 billion in assets across 17 countries, We employ 847 people directly and support approximately 15,000 jobs through our portfolio companies. Last year, our investments generated $2.1 billion in profits, of which $340 million was donated to educational and development charities worldwide. Camilla had gone completely white. But you can't. Meridian Financial is what? Dear cousin. I smiled at her with genuine warmth. One of your major clients, actually. As of 6 weeks ago. Meridian Financial's European division is a wholly owned subsidiary of Martinez Capital Partners, which means, technically, you work for me. The sound Camilla made was somewhere between a gasp and a dying wail. Don't worry, I continued conversationally. Your job is safe as long as your performance reviews justify your position, although I should mention that your new direct supervisor will be Alessandro Romano, our head of European operations. He's 28 years old, has an MBA from INSEAD, and speaks 5 languages. I think you'll find working for someone younger than you to be a valuable learning experience. My mother finally found her voice. How long? She whispered. How long have you been successful? I asked. About 12 years. Since I was 25 and you were all convinced I was throwing my life away by turning down Alejandro Herrera's proposal. I checked my watch, noting that I needed to start wrapping this up if I wanted to make my flight. Speaking of which, Alejandro's shipping company has been struggling lately. Something about poor investment decisions and market timing. I've been considering acquiring their Mediterranean routes, but I wanted to wait until the price dropped a bit more. Eduardo looked like he might faint. You've been listening to us criticize you while I was building an empire. I shrugged. It seemed like useful market research. I wanted to see how long it would take for any of you to ask what I actually did for a living, rather than assuming I was living some kind of artistic fantasy. My phone rang, displaying a number I recognized immediately. I held up one finger to indicate I needed to take the call. Your Royal Highness, I answered, speaking loudly enough for nearby people to hear. Yes, I'm still planning to arrive in London tonight. No. The merger went through smoothly, 2.3 billion, as projected. I listened for a moment, aware that every person within 20 feet was hanging on my side of the conversation. Of course, yes, I'll bring the infrastructure proposals. The Commonwealth Fund allocation should be finalized by Friday. I hung up and noticed that the crowd around us had grown significantly. Word had apparently spread that something interesting was happening near the Martinez family seating area. I'm sorry, I said to my family, but I really do need to leave soon. I have breakfast at Buckingham Palace tomorrow morning, and the flight to London takes 3 hours. As if summoned by perfect dramatic timing, I heard a familiar voice calling my name from across the ballroom. Angelina, there you are, darling. I've been looking everywhere for you. I turned to see Prince Henrik of Denmark making his way through the crowd, still wearing his traveling clothes and looking slightly frazzled from what had obviously been a rushed trip from Copenhagen. Henrik was one of my favorite clients and had become a genuine friend over the past 3 years. He was also devastatingly handsome, spoke 6 languages, and managed the Danish royal family's private investment portfolio with the kind of shrewd intelligence that most people didn't expect from someone born into a palace. Henrik. I embraced him warmly, genuinely delighted to see him despite the awkward timing. I thought you weren't coming until next week. Change of plans, he said, kissing both my cheeks in the European fashion. The renewable energy project moved up its timeline, and I wanted to discuss the terms in person before you fly off to your next royal appointment. He glanced around at the stunned faces surrounding us, his eyes twinkling with amusement as he recognized the situation. I see you've been having fun with your little disguise again, he said with a grin. Did you really spend the evening pretending to be a server at your own event? It seemed like a worthwhile social experiment, I replied, though I think the results are fairly conclusive at this point. Henrik laughed, the sound warm and genuinely delighted. You are absolutely incorrigible. No wonder the Queen enjoys your visits so much. He turned toward my family, who were staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to absolute terror. You must be Angelina's family, he said with practiced royal charm. I'm Henrik. I work with Angelina on various investment projects for the Danish crown. Investment projects, my mother managed to croak. Oh yes, Henrik said enthusiastically. Angelina manages about $400 million of our renewable energy portfolio. Brilliant returns, excellent social impact. We're hoping to expand the partnership to include the Swedish and Norwegian funds as well. He pulled out his phone and showed them something on the screen. Just last month, her team completed this wind farm project in Scotland, providing clean energy to 50,000 homes while generating steady returns for our pension funds. Camilla looked like she was having an out-of-body experience. But we thought she was serving drinks. Henrik's eyebrows rose in amusement. Well, technically she was, wasn't she? Though I suspect the wine came from her own vineyard. The 2019 Tempranillo, I confirmed. We had an excellent harvest that year. Henrik nodded approvingly. I told King Charles about your Spanish wines. He's quite interested in adding them to the Windsor cellar. King Charles. Eduardo's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Oh yes, Henrik said casually. Angelina has breakfast with him monthly. Something about Commonwealth investment strategies and sustainable development projects. Terribly important work. He checked his own watch and frowned. Speaking of which, darling, shouldn't you be heading to the airport soon? You know how Charles gets when people are late to breakfast. I nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted by the evening's performance. You're right, I should go. I turned back to my family, who were all staring at me like I'd just announced I was secretly an alien. Well, I said, smoothing down my simple black dress. This has been illuminating, Mother, Eduardo. Camilla, it's been educational listening to your thoughts about my life choices. My mother tried to stand, reaching toward me with something approaching desperation. Angelina, wait, we didn't know. We never realized. You never asked, I said simply. In 12 years, none of you ever asked what I actually did for a living. You just assumed I was failing because my success didn't look like what you expected success to look like. But we can fix this, Camilla said urgently. We can. We can start over. We can what suddenly be proud of me now that you know I'm wealthy? I shook my head. The time for family pride was when I was 25 and scared and building something from nothing. Not now, when I'm 37 and successful despite you, not because of you. Eduardo stepped forward, his face earnest with what appeared to be genuine remorse. Angelina, please. We made mistakes. We judged too quickly. But we're family. You're people who share my DNA, I corrected gently. Family supports each other. Family believes in each other. Family asks questions before making assumptions. Henrik watched this exchange with the careful neutrality of someone who'd dealt with complicated family dynamics in royal circles. I'm not angry, I continued, and I realized it was true. I'm not interested in revenge or making you suffer. I'm just done. Done pretending your opinions matter. Done hoping for approval that should have been given freely years ago. I picked up my simple black purse and checked that I had my phone and passport. The gala is lovely. By the way, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the evening. The foundation you were celebrating tonight, the one that sponsors educational scholarships, it's one of mine. The children you helped tonight will receive excellent educations, regardless of their family's opinion of their potential. As Henrik and I walked toward the exit, I could hear the murmur of conversations starting up behind us. Word would spread quickly through Madrid's social circles. The Martinez family disappointment was actually one of Europe's most successful investment managers. The woman they'd pitied was richer and more powerful than anyone in that room. That was beautifully handled, Henrik said as we reached the entrance. Though I have to ask, how long were you planning to let them keep talking? I wasn't sure. I admitted. Part of me wanted to see how far they'd go. It was almost anthropological watching people create a narrative about someone they'd never bothered to understand. My driver was already waiting with the car, having been alerted by my security team that I was ready to leave. "Will you see them again?" Henrik asked as we walked toward the vehicle. I thought about this question carefully. Probably, Madrid isn't that large, and will inevitably end up at the same events, but the relationship has fundamentally changed now. They know who I am, which means they can't unknow it. And you, how do you feel about that? I considered the question as my driver opened the car door. Relieved. Actually, I spent 12 years hiding my success because some part of me hoped they'd love me for who I was, not what I achieved. Tonight proved they were never going to do that. As we settled into the car, my phone immediately began buzzing with messages. I glanced at them briefly: 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 text messages from Camilla, and a WhatsApp message from Eduardo that appeared to contain several paragraphs. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. "The interesting thing," I told Henrik as we drove toward the airport, "is that I think I've been holding myself back professionally because I was trying to stay small enough not to threaten their egos. That ends now." Henrik smiled. "Good. The world needs more women who refuse to minimize themselves for other people's comfort." And at the airport, my flight crew was already conducting pre-flight checks on the Gulfstream G650. It was a beautiful aircraft, efficient, comfortable, and capable of making the London trip in under 3 hours. "Are you sure you don't want company on the flight?" Henrik asked as we approached the plane. "I could come along and we could review the renewable energy proposals together." "Thank you, but I need some time to think," I said. "Besides, you have your own royal duties to attend to." As the plane took off from Madrid, I looked down at the city lights growing smaller below us. Somewhere down there, my family was probably still processing what had happened tonight. They'd wake up tomorrow to a world where their greatest disappointment was actually their most successful member. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the contracts for tomorrow's meeting with King Charles. The Commonwealth Development Fund represented $500 million in infrastructure investments across 14 countries' water systems, renewable energy, educational facilities, and medical clinics that would improve millions of lives. This was real impact. This was the kind of success that actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant: "Madrid story already trending on financial Twitter. 3 interview requests from European business magazines. How should I respond?" I typed back: "Standard policy. No personal interviews. Professional inquiries can be directed through the normal channels." As we crossed into French airspace, I allowed myself to think about what came next. The family relationship was permanently changed, but that wasn't necessarily a loss. I'd spent years hoping for approval that was never going to come, allowing that hope to limit my ambitions and constrain my life. Now I was free to be as successful as I chose to be, without worrying about making anyone else uncomfortable. I pulled up my portfolio management app and began planning the next phase of expansion. There were opportunities in emerging markets, sustainable technology ventures, and social impact investments that could double our assets under management within 3 years. The woman who'd once been dismissed as a failure was about to become one of the most powerful people in European finance. And this time, she wasn't going to hide it from anyone. I woke up in my London apartment 3 hours before my breakfast meeting with King Charles, feeling more rested than I had in months. There was something liberating about no longer carrying the weight of family disappointment. I'd finally stopped trying to be small enough for other people's comfort. My phone showed 47 missed calls and 83 unread messages, most from Madrid numbers I recognized. I deleted them all without reading them and called my assistant instead. "Good morning, Maria. How bad is the coverage?" "Actually, it's quite positive," she said cheerfully. "The business press is calling it the revelation of the decade. Forbes wants to move up your interview. The Financial Times wants to do a feature on hidden female wealth in European finance. And the family. Your mother has called the office 16 times, your cousin has sent approximately 30 emails, your stepfather tried to get your hotel information from the London office. I laughed, despite myself. Standard protocol applies. I'm unavailable for personal calls until further notice. At Buckingham Palace, King Charles was waiting in his private study with coffee, pastries, and a stack of investment proposals that would have made most fund managers weep with envy. Angelina, he said warmly, I heard you had an interesting evening in Madrid. Word traveled fast in royal circles, apparently. Henrik mentioned you'd finally revealed yourself to your family, he continued with a smile. How did they take it? About as well as you'd expect from people who spent 12 years assuming I was serving coffee somewhere. Their loss, he said simply. Now, shall we discuss the African Infrastructure Fund? I have some interesting proposals from Ghana and Kenya. As we reviewed billion-dollar investment strategies over breakfast in a palace, I realized something profound had shifted in my life. I was no longer the woman hiding her success to protect other people's feelings. I was no longer worried about being too much for small minds to handle. I was simply Angelina Martinez, CEO of Martinez Capital Partners. And I was exactly as powerful as I'd always been, except now. Everyone knew it. The silent empire had spoken, and the world was listening. My name is Angelina Martinez. I built a financial empire while my family thought I was pouring coffee. And now that they know the truth, I'm just getting started. Success doesn't need applause to be real, but sometimes, when people finally hear your name whispered with awe instead of pity, it's nice to know you earned every syllable.